whatsoever against the intentions of the government of Sri Lanka. Now, Major General Milinda Peiris spoke of a new role for the armed forces in the situation which has now manifested itself in our country. There is a transition that has taken place, and there must be adaptation to the contemporary circumstances. I would suggest to you that the new role of the armed forces has two dimensions, an internal dimension and an external dimension. If we may dwell briefly on the internal aspect, I think the armed forces have a major role in facilitating as smoothly as possible, without the minimum of pain and discomfort, the transition from the conflict to the era of peace and tranquility which has happily arrived for our motherland. In societies which go through that phase, there are many examples, even from Asian countries. That is a potentially difficult period because you are emerging from the trauma of the past and you are emerging into the light and the promise of the future. There is consequently and almost inevitably some degree of turbulence and unrest. So the armed forces have a specific role in ensuring conditions of serenity in order to make that transition as easy as possible for the people who inhabit the affected areas. The armed forces also have a crucial role to play with regard to development, particularly in respect of the development of infrastructure. Because I want to tell you very frankly that among the institutions in this country which have won the respect and the confidence of the people, the armed forces occupy a preeminent position. One of Sri Lanka's inherent strengths over the ages has been the strength and the durability of our institutions. And today, without contradiction, without fear of contradiction, it can be asserted that the armed forces are one of the major institutions in which the overwhelming majority of the people of Sri Lanka repose an unprecedentedly high degree of confidence. Therefore, as we rebuild the infrastructure, as we improve the lot of our people, as we enhance connectivity, giving our farmers access to markets, and enabling civilian life to return to a threshold of normalcy as rapidly as possible, there is no way that the armed forces can relieve themselves of this crucial obligation. I would also suggest that the armed forces have a role to play in promoting a culture in those areas, in the setting of which different communities, speaking different languages, professing different religions, and coming from different backgrounds, can live with each other, work with each other, productively in a spirit of amity and goodwill. The armed forces have a role in assisting in the creation and the strengthening of structures which would be conducive to the accomplishment of that objective, bringing communities together, a time of healing, a period of rapprochement. The armed forces also have duties to perform with regard to ensuring conditions of order and stability in which the revival of the electoral process can take place. To my mind, the most heinous thing that the LTTE did was to decimate the legitimate democratic Tamil leadership, thereby creating a vacuum which now needs to be filled. The suffrage is the fons et origo. It is the source of all democratic rights and freedoms. It is that fundamental right, and we often forget this when we talk of human rights. It is that fundamental right of which the people of the North were deprived for so long. With relatively little protest from the people who are now crying out from the rooftops about imaginary transgressions. So that is to my mind, the internal aspect of the role that the people of this country expect of the armed forces at this juncture in our contemporary history. To turn our minds now to the external dimension, that is no less significant. This has won the recognition of the international community. The Navy in particular has played a magnificent role in extenuating, in mitigating the problems that arise from illicit immigration into other countries, into Australia, into Canada, and possibly New Zealand. I have had discussions on this matter with many of my counterparts in foreign governments when I met them recently at international gatherings. Most recently in Bali, in Indonesia, and also at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. The representatives of these countries have expressed warm appreciation of the dynamism of the Navy, of the action that the Navy has taken, which has resulted in these problems becoming much less acute than they would otherwise have been. Illicit immigration is creating problems of major magnitude in those countries. Problems connected with law and order, problems connected with social unrest in those countries. Vessels like Sunsea, the Ocean Lady, and most recently, last month, a vessel called Alicia, which was detained by the Indonesian authorities in their waters. These are matters in respect of which there was a role for the Sri Lankan Navy to play, and that role has been discharged by the Navy in a manner that has won the unqualified praise of countries which would have been made vulnerable by the consequences of illicit immigration on that scale. Do not forget that in comparable situations in other parts of the world, including Southeast Asia, there has been a major problem connected with the proliferation of small weapons during that period of transition from conflict to stability. Those are problems which have been minimized. Indeed, those problems did not exist at all in our own country. You are aware that terrorist groups do not work in isolation. They have linkages. I'm happy that Professor Rohan Gunaratne is here with us. On a recent visit to Singapore, I visited his institute, the S. Rajaratnam Institute, which does very valuable work